Hey everyone, Zeep here. And well, let's talk about some cryptids. Now personally, I don't believe in them, but I do find them astronomically insane. In terms of them just being like so cool to talk about. For the very few of you who don't know what a cryptid is, they're basically an animal that has never been proven to exist, and they are bizarre. They can also be an extraterrestrial figure, among also being able to be an interdimensional being. They range from giant bats, giant turtles, and whatever the hell a Wendigo is, and get so far-fetched that I thought to myself, I should make a video about this. Once again, it's me, Zeep. We're about to hit 100k, so if you guys could subscribe, that would be really well appreciated. And if you want a sequel to this, let's get this to say 5,000 likes. Enough messing around, let's talk about some weird stuff. The Beast of Busco. Snapping turtles. What do we know about them? Well, they're largely found in the east portion of the United States, and also the southeastern region of Canada. Well, when it comes to this entry, we're going to be looking at the Midwest, most notably the small town of Churubusco in Indiana, in which the urban legend of a giant turtle reigns dominant. With a population of 1,800, locals in the area have told the legend of a giant snapping turtle that lies between Folk Lake. The story goes like this. In 1948, two guys were fishing at the lake. While fishing, they reportedly saw a huge turtle that was estimated to weigh over 500 pounds. A farmer who also lived in the area by the name of Gale Harris, who owned the land at the time, reported that he also saw the giant turtle. This led to national attention, with scuba expeditions throughout the lake occurring. They also thought about draining the lake, but the Beast of Busco was never found. Reports of the size of the big turtle described it being the size of a car's roof, which isn't exactly too insanely huge when I think about it, but I think I might be spoiled because when I think of giant turtles, I think about like Gamera or Blastoise from Pokemon. Other reports state that it was as big as a kitchen table, which isn't exactly Gamera size. As mentioned earlier, reports of the turtle became nationally famous, with mobs of people heading over towards the small town trying to get a sight of this big ass turtle. If I had to guess, it was probably like a really slow news week or something because a lot of people got super hyped up over this giant turtle. And don't get me wrong, I think that's actually pretty epic. Gale Harris, the owner of the land, tried his hardest to prove that this turtle was real, which unfortunately led to his downfall. In draining his own lake, Gale Harris ended up bankrupting himself. One of the farmers who spotted the turtle, Charlie Wilson, was embarrassed following the failure of trying to get proof for this turtle. So much so that the descendants of Wilson refused to talk about it years after the turtle wasn't found.
It was somewhat of an embarrassment to the family with what had happened that we didn't talk about Churubusco. When the whole thing went down and them not finding the turtle ultimately and it leading to Gale Harris's death, a lot of people feel in our family that he trying to prove that, stressed himself out so much that that's what led to his death, that Grandpa chose not to settle in Churubusco, but instead in Wells County. My great-grandfather would have never had lied about this. His integrity was too big for that, and he would have never let Gale Harris do what he did, you know, losing everything looking for this turtle if it wasn't true.
In the years after, Churubusco still remains a small town. A town that ended up naming their famous turtle as Oscar, based off the name of the first farmer who inherited the land. And I think this is the cutest part about the entire story. The turtle serves as a mascot for the entire town, with even an annual Turtles Day festival taking place every year to celebrate the legend. Some people state that Oscar the Turtle was actually one of the last stupendous turtles to ever exist on planet Earth, which if you didn't know, a stupendous turtle is, they were some of the biggest ass turtles to ever exist on the planet. And to that I say it's fairly unlikely, but that's just fun to hear about. And that's what really is so cool about this story. It was just fun.
As far as we know, he's still there.
Of course I believe Oscar's out there. I would not be a Busconian if I didn't think Oscar was out there somewhere.
The Wendigo. Oh my god, I absolutely love this thing. In a way that's just morbidly interesting. It was first sighted 40,000 years ago, and it appears in the coldest type of climates. And by coldest, I'm just talking about Canada in the wintertime. It's freezing. Seriously, I'm about to go up to Ohio, which is right by Canada, for a little trip. I am very fearful of my Southern California body and what will happen to it. It's part of ancient Native American lore, and well, it eats flesh. It has human-like characteristics, but it's giant and can run at massive speeds. A supernatural being, its association with winter is grand. What's interesting is that the Wendigo is a manifestation as a human being who has transformed into them. due to them being overtaken by greed and just weakness. Their thirst for blood and ability to infect others is a metaphor for general negative characteristics. The Wendigo is symbolic for many things. For one, the importance of community. For those who have become Wendigos, they tend to be the individuals who are left out of the community, isolated from society, and feeling weak compared to others around them. They then become bitter, becoming the Wendigo, and going after those who are part of the community. In the past, indigenous cultures had to work together to survive the winter. In order to survive, the community needed to cooperate with each other and share their food and possessions. This means that there was no room for one single individual to be selfish with their goods. Being selfish and focusing on oneself could have led to the downfall of said nation. Perhaps not directly being cannibalistic, but leading to the death of others due to said selfishness. Wendigos are hardly an obscure type of cryptid. In fact, they're one of the more famous ones, especially in recent pop culture. They've appeared in video games and various TV shows. That being said, the Wendigo's interpretation of what it looks like has changed all throughout media, including this one deer skull version of the Wendigo. I do enjoy this one, but some others don't because it lacks a human interpretation of the folklore, but those also have to keep in mind that the Wendigo's interpretation ranges from all of North America, either being humanistic or more beast-like compared to others. It walks hastily through blizzards, stalking its victims, with a hideous stench surrounding it. A human being that has become a cannibalistic monster, only driven by consumption. And that's what the Wendigo really is. The Wendigo is a product of hunger, of desperation, of the most evil human beings could be. It is morbid and dreadful, and no wonder it's one of the most popular cryptids, because it is fascinating. Anyways, next up. Indrid Cold, rural West Virginia, 1966. A man by the name of Woodrow Derenberger is driving along the Interstate 77 when he notices a pair of lights in his rearview mirror following him. The lights then move on ahead and appear to be a ship, landing in front of Derenberger in an object that looks like a giant kerosene lamp chimney. A man exited from the ship and walked over to Derenberger's car to chat with him, asking Derenberger to roll down his window, and where the two would share a 10-minute conversation. A conversation which would take place telegraphically, in which the grinning man said his name was Indrid Cold. Woody described the man as very friendly, with a smile that just wouldn't go away. He said that they came in peace, with Woody being unsure with who they was.
The grinning man then would tell Woody that they would meet again.
Then the man left in his ship. Woody immediately went to the police station, reporting what had just happened. But of course, the police didn't believe him. I mean, it's pretty bizarre. So he went on a news station to talk about it, and his interview is quite interesting.
And he asked me, he said, why are you frightened? He said, don't be frightened, we wish you no harm. He said, we mean you no harm, we wish you only happiness.
You believe in flying saucers?
I have never believed in flying saucers before. I have heard about them a few times. I've even read in the paper about flying objects.
Do you believe in them now?
I believe in what I seen last night. I don't believe it was a saucer, but I believe it was an alien, some kind of an aircraft or spacecraft or something.
The following case shifted the national attention to West Virginia, where the incident occurred, which would only stay in West Virginia for the next year, when in 1966, the Mothman was allegedly spotted for the first time, eventually culminating in 1967, when the Silver Bridge at Point Pleasant, West Virginia collapsed, killing 46 people, with many around the town blaming the Mothman for said tragedy. The Grinning Man was really the beginning of these weird and bizarre sightings connected with the state of West Virginia that continues to haunt the state to this day. Despite this, there are other reports across the Midwest that suggested that the Grinning Man, or Indrid Cold, had his first sighting in New Jersey, when two boys who were fooling around the streets allegedly came in contact with him, with a man with unnatural facial structures and a lack of ears and nose. The man was wearing a metal green suit and chased after the boys, with the boys managing to escape from them and describing the man as just a completely bizarre individual. I understand that is pretty weird that he chased after these boys. Like, where's the actual based Indrid Cold, who was really nice to Woody and gave like that big conversation with him? And why is this Indrid Cold like really weird and chasing after these boys? People have said that this smiling man who chased after the boys is not the same as the other smiling man who met up with Woody, but I don't know, it then gets to be a little confusing, because a couple months later there ends up to be a third spotted incident with the Grinning Man, but it's said to be more of a poltergeist instead of an actual alien. This rural myth unfortunately does not have a happy ending for Woody Derenberger. Derenberger would continue to stress that Indrid Cold would come to his house and visit him often. Derenberger's family would continue to back him up over these claims. However, the media attention served to be negative towards the family, with tons of ridicule and prank calls attacking the household. Durenberger sought medical attention, but his physician told him that there was no chemical imbalance or disruption. He wrote a couple books, but his family began to resent him as well, eventually leading to his wife to divorce him. Durenberger passed away in 1990, at 74 years old, and allegedly speaking, Indrid Cold was there at the funeral, mourning his longtime friend.
How did he terminate this contract?
He terminated his conversation very quickly, but just before he started, he said, Mr. Durenberger, we will be seeing you again.
The Flatwoods Monster. This one's probably like the most horrifying one out of anything else on this list, and that's because I just find it the most creepy out of all of them. So once again, with this cryptid, we're taken back to West Virginia, but this time in the year 1952. Most specifically, the small town of Flatwoods, West Virginia. With only a population of nearly 300 people, the town takes pride of being the home of the Green Monster. That is, the Flatwoods Monster. One night while at Flatwoods, a pair of boys were playing football at a school playground, when suddenly, along the skyline, a fireball exploded, which according to the boys, landed upon a hilltop. The boys became frightened and reported back to their homes, in which a lady by the name of Kathleen May gathered a pair of boys to go examine the said object on top of the hill. And let me mention something that isn't super important to the story, but like this was like on private property. So she gathered a whole group of people to trespass over this private property, and they didn't get in trouble, which I just find kind of funny. So by the time they reached the top of the hill, it's like nighttime, and this is where accounts of the stories between the group who came to investigate all differ. One of the stories states that they noticed this giant pulsating ball of fire, while another story claims that there were two eyes staring at them. Eyes that were staring at them from an oak tree. They were carrying flashlights, and they assumed that the eyes staring at them were like from like a raccoon or a possum, but instead it turned out to be a 10-foot monster with a blood-red face and a green body that seemed to glow. As soon as they saw a monster, they let out a terrified scream, falling over backwards with the monster then chasing after them, with an overpowering smell that burned their nostrils and made them sick, with some of the party fainting and then vomiting, even for several hours after returning to the town. I'm quoting straight from the news clippings that reported about this. This is crazy. Allegedly, the monster had a red face with a pointed hood-like shape. Said design eventually became iconic, appearing in various video games and movies in the future. Eventually, when the group came back to town, they reported the incident to the sheriff, leading to the sheriff and the deputy to search the area, but finding nothing. The group also contacted a man by the name of A. Lee Stewart, a co-publisher of the Braxton County Democrat, a local newspaper of the area. Stewart brought a team with him to investigate the area and came back with a different story, stating that there was a sickening odor that was still present, with bizarre heat waves in the air. They would later state that the group that reported the incident were the most scared people they had ever seen, and that people don't make up that kind of story that quickly. The next morning, Stewart returned to the area and found 2 skid marks in the grass, alongside other objects including deposits of oil. The incident became nationally publicized, with many people looking at West Virginia to see what was going on, as what tends to happen when a cryptid is allegedly noticed. After said incident, multiple other people claimed that they had also seen the monster, including one from a nearby town where a man described the monster actually being a reptilian, and that's when things got more bizarre and people started to really doubt the story. This actually led to one of my first times ever being exposed to the monster, in which it appears in a History Channel documentary, and it just looks so bad.
Eyewitnesses reported 10 to 12 foot tall, terrifying creature, reptilian in appearance. It is said to have long, thin arms, 2 fingers, and scaly skin. The monster appears to hover over its victims in some sort of craft or suit and emits a piercing noise and dangerous toxic gases.
Yeah, this isn't scary. This version of the Flatwoods Monster is just... oh my god, it looks like... what are they doing? Unfortunately, in the years that followed, the accounts about the incident have drifted, including just these fake fabrications of what apparently the group ended up saying decades after the event, in which they described the monster as more metallic than actually alien. And let me stress this apparent, oh hey, I actually recall this information, is fabricated by the internet to I guess try and twist the words of what that group experienced to align with one's own idea of what they want the monster to look like. Which kind of just like sucks because you get like true monstrosities like the History Channel nowhere near what the original concept of the monster was. For example, there was an alleged dug-up 1991 interview in which one of the group members allegedly said that there was a secret plane that the government was working on that turned out to actually be the monster, with that entire account just completely faked by some rando online. In the years that have followed, there have been many that have tried to debunk the Flatwoods Monster theory. For example, the oil that I had mentioned prior that had apparently been found in the area was likely from the truck that was used to get to the location. The awful scent that had been described has been explained to be just the grass that was abound in the area. I have never been to West Virginia personally, so I don't have an account of the grass, but if anyone has been there, let me know. As for the fire pulsating ball that had apparently gone over the skyline, that was apparently just a meteor that was just going over Earth that night. Now, when it comes to the eyewitnesses account though, this is when it becomes a little more complex, because the various eyewitness accounts contradict each other, including one that said that there was this pulsating ball of flame that didn't actually exist according to other people who were there. As for the descriptions of the alien, many have suggested it to be a barn owl, with the part under it likely being a bush that made it seem like it was actually 10 to like 17 feet tall. The light was only shined at the supposed alien for less than 2 seconds. This is where context is important, because at the time, extraterrestrial media was being released and popularized in pop culture. Aliens, or whatever they had in mind, had made their minds go rampant. Especially with it being at night, and after seeing a weird meteor thing, these people were probably freaked out, and got even more freaked out the moment they saw this mysterious figure. With that being said, the Flatwoods Monster is awesome. One of my first exposures to it, without even knowing, was in The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. One of the more weird scenes in Majora's Mask occurs in Romani's ranch, when there's a big ghost invasion leading to Link to fend off and defend the ranch. I wouldn't say it's creepy per se compared to other stuff that's in this game, but more bizarre. If Link fails to save the ranch, the cattle of the farm will be taken away by aliens. Although that Nintendo hasn't confirmed that these enemies were inspired by the Flatwoods Monster, it is widely agreed by many of the fans that it is a Flatwood. The Flatwood has not only appeared in Majora's Mask, but many other video games and movies alike. And when it comes to 1950s cryptid, it really is one of the most bizarre but fascinating stories of West Virginia. Real or fake, their indictment in pop culture is legendary. The Loveland Frog. So I might as well just end this video with a visit to America's most least favorite state, Ohio. I'm just kidding around, Ohioans. I actually don't know why a lot of people give your state a bad rap. I think it's probably just fine. I mean, I am visiting Ohio in a couple weeks, and to those I've told this to, a lot of them have just said, why are you doing that to yourself? Listen, I think everything's gonna go down fine. When I go there, I'm gonna learn to love that state and become a big Ohio defender. And Ohio, this entry of this video is particularly targeted towards you, so this is my tribute. Alright, so the Loveland Frog. I gotta be honest, my first exposure to this was a YouTube video that I found that has like 11,000 views. And for a cryptid that's just so comically funny, like a giant frog, I can't help but not take seriously this video's like intro, which is supposed to be like really creepy. I mean, just take a look at this.
In our world, there are all kinds of animals.
So here's how the story goes. One night in 1955, a traveling salesman going down Loveland, Ohio, was crossing through a poorly lit bridge over the Little Miami River. Suddenly he saw 3 humanoid frog-looking like creatures talking amongst each other, oblivious that someone was watching them. All 3 of the frogs seemed to be about 3.5 feet tall, with leathery skin and webbed hands and feet. They had bulging eyes, wide mouths, and deep grooves on their heads instead of hair. What comes up next is probably the funniest part of the story and most unbelievable. They then saw the man, and when they realized they had been caught, one of them pulled out a wand and waved it, sending a spray of sparks flying throughout the air, with the man then starting to just run away after that because I guess that's some freaky stuff, so I would run away too. 2 decades later, in 1972, a police officer was driving through. It was around 1 AM and then he noticed this weird humanoid giant creature glowing in his headlights. It apparently looked similar to the story of the salesman that had happened back in the 1950s. It had very distinct frog-like features, and when the frog noticed the headlights, it just skittled away, leading to the officer to be really bewildered. Around 2 weeks after that incident, another police officer, Mark Matthews, saw another unidentified animal crouching along the road, around the same area where the incident had taken place 2 weeks before. Matthews noticed the animal was around 3 to 3.5 feet long. Alarmed, he ended up shooting the animal and bringing it back to the station, and where they discovered that it was just this giant iguana without a tail. The police officer from the prior incident confirmed that that iguana was just that same giant frog he had allegedly spotted a couple weeks prior, so I guess it was an entire nothing burger. cheeseburger, unfortunately. But that's not where our story ends. In the summer of 2016, 2 teenagers were playing the game Pokemon Go within the Loveland area, and where they claimed to see a giant frog walking around a lake that stood up and walked on its hind legs. I mean, that's kinda cool. A giant frog in Loveland, the legend goes on, but unfortunately, it was basically a homemade frog costume and some random teenager just screwing around. In fact, in 2020, teenagers have continued to mock the legend by entering sewers around Loveland and wearing just these giant frog costumes, which is kind of fun, admittedly. I mean, what else is there to do in these small towns besides just run around in giant frog costumes? This has been really fun. If you want more, just like the video and also subscribe to Zeepstered. I love you guys. Goodbye.